Hello everyone, hope you all are doing well. Welcome to Diplomat's desk. I am your host Meet Shah. So, what are we witnessing in the Americas, particularly the burgeoning partnership between Brazil and China? Merits our attention because it has strategic consequences far beyond bilateral trade. So, over the next 5 minutes, I'll walk you through the key dimensions of China's entrenchment in the Brazil economy, its implications for the hemispheric power of dynamics, and what this means for countries like India as well as for the global governance and regional alignments. Let's talk about the rise of China in Brazil from commodity partner to strategic base. Let's begin by examining what is changing in the China Brazil relationship. For years, China's role in the Brazil was relatively narrow. China bought raw materials like soybeans, iron ore, crude oil, and traded manufactured goods. Brazil supplied, China consumes. From January to October 2024, total trade between China and Brazil rose by nearly 9.9%, reaching about 158.3 billion US dollars. So China's export to Brazil in 2024 alone were about 72 billion US dollars. So on the investment front, according to the Brazil China Business Council (CEBC), Chinese firms registered 39 new projects in Brazil in 2024, worth roughly 4.18 billion US dollars. So a 113% increase compared with 2023. So these numbers may still be smaller than overall US investment in Brazil, but the pace and direction of change matter. China is no longer just buying, it's building, manufacturing, and embedding itself in the Brazil's industrial and consumer economy. More specifically, the power electricity sector accounted for about 34% of China's Brazilian investment in 2024 and oil and gas about 25%. Renewable energy is also growing domain. Chinese firms are active in Brazil's wind and solar sectors. So, beyond energy and raw materials, Chinese manufacturing, for example, electric vehicles and services are moving in. From a diplomat viewpoint, Brazil is transitioning from being a supplier of commodities to being a strategic manufacturing and export platform for China. And that has consequences for supply chains, regional influences, and geopolitics. So, why Brazil and why now? Why is China accelerating in Brazil at this time? And why is Brazil receptive? So China's motivation is resource and industrial security. China needs access to energy, minerals, and global manufacturing platforms, and Brazil offers all three, from oil and renewables to critical minerals and consumer markets. Market and gateway logic. By establishing production in Brazil, Chinese firms can serve not only Brazil but the broader South American market. There is a trade advantage logic via integration in regional blocs like Mercosur, MERCOSUR. Diplomatic leverage. Every major investment, joint venture, and infrastructure link is also an instrument of soft power and influence. What are the Brazil's motivation behind all this? Economic diversifications. Brazil remains heavily reliant on commodity exports and wants to upgrade industrial capacity, attract capital, and create jobs. Foreign policy repositioning. Under President Brazil had pursued a foreign policy of active non-alignment, South cooperation, and multilateralism, which opens door to a deeper China engagement. Infrastructure and technology needs. Brazil's renewables, transport, manufacturing sectors require substantial investment. China can bring capital, technology, and market access. So, from India's viewpoint, we are seeing a shift in the global division of labor and influence. China is planting deeper roots in Latin America, and Brazil is accepting those roots in pursuit of its own agenda. So, strategic implications for the Americas and for India. Hemisphere-wide consequences are erosion of the US backyard. Historically, Latin America was considered by the United States as its sphere of influence. A deepening China-Brazil economic link challenges that dynamic. Regional supply China Regional supply chain realignment. With Chinese manufacturing in Brazil, exports to neighbors become easier, especially under the bloc arrangements like Mercosur, meaning China may access broader Latin America through Brazil as a hub. Diplomatic ripple effects. If Brazil aligns more closely with China, economically its diplomatic posture for example, global governance, multilateral forums, may increasingly reflect Beijing's interest, diminishing US and allied influence. So specific risks and opportunities for India are: India can observe how China is engaging Brazil and Latin America to draw lessons. India might deepen its own ties with Brazil in technology, agriculture, and renewable energy to maintain balance and presence. What are the risks here? A China Brazil axis that extends into Latin America could limit space for the other actors, including India, to engage meaningfully in the region. Moreover, if Chinese firms dominate sectors in Latin America, it may reduce demand for Indian exports or investment partnerships. So, what is the strategic posture? From an Indian diplomatic view, India must decide whether to respond by forging its own network in Latin America, perhaps via Brazil, or focus elsewhere while maintaining multilateral options like BRICS, G20, and guarding its supply chain interest, example in mining and renewables. So, what are the key areas and diplomatic considerations here? Key sectors to monitor are energy and renewables. China's investment in Brazil's electricity sector is substantial. 34% of Chinese investment in 2024 went into this. Automotive and EV manufacturing. Chinese firms are building factories in Brazil. For example, the factory of BYD in Bahia to serve Latin American markets. Note there are labor rights concerns tied to one of the BYD's Brazilian sites. Services and digital economy. Chinese services firms like mobility apps, delivery platforms are entering Brazil, expanding China's footprint beyond manufacturing, trade, and regional integrations. Brazil's membership in Mercosur gives China built-in advantage for regional access via Brazil's manufacturing. So diplomatic considerations for India is or any third party country engagement with Brazil. India should consider enhancing bilateral ties with Brazil in technology, in infrastructure, defense, agriculture, so as to maintain influence and not to be excluded. So, trade chain awareness. As a Chinese goods made in Brazil entering neighboring markets under Mercosur rules, India must monitor any shifting trade flows that might affect its own exports or strategic resources. On multilateral fronts, Brazil, as the 2025 chair of BRICS 17th summit hosted in Rio and an advocate for global South cooperations, offers India an opportunity to shape agenda setting. What is the balancing act here? Brazil's diplomacy is active non-aligned, meaning it will straddle China, US, and other partners. India should calibrate accordingly, neither assuming confrontations nor being passive. So, what are my views here in my assessment? China's accelerated penetration into Brazil is a structural shift, not just a short-term trade glitch. Brazil is evolving from being a resource supplier to being an integrated production and consumer node within China's broader strategy, and this matters to global power dynamics. From India's vantage point, we could welcome healthy competition and diversified investment in Latin America. It signals a more multipolar world. But we must also recognize that if one external sector dominates a region like China, the risks of asymmetric dependencies, diplomatic levers, and supply chain vulnerabilities increases. India should not adopt a zero-sum view but a strategic mindset. Engage Brazil with long-term thinking, align where interests overlaps. Example, digital infrastructure, renewables, agriculture, and keep channels open across Latin America. Simultaneously, India should monitor the implications for Taiwan, for US Latin America relations, and for broader patterns of South South collaborations because the architecture of global influence is shifting. So, if we conclude this, China's deepening footprint in Brazil is transforming the region's economic architectures. For the America, this means new power centers, altered alliances, and changing trade flows. For India and the other global South actors, this means both opportunity and caution. Engagement diversification and strategic foresight are key. If we are to remain competitive and influential in this century, we must invest in three things: broader engagement, expand our diplomatic and economic presence in Latin America, especially via Brazil. Strategic partnerships align with like minded countries, including Brazil's in technology, infrastructure, clean energy, and digital economy. Analytical vigilance monitor how supply chains, trade blocks, investment flows, and regional alignments evolve. Thank you for attention, guys. I look forward to your questions and to lively discussions that I hope will follow. Like, share, and subscribe if you Like this analysis. See you in the next one.